Well, it is the end of spring break, and that has taken its toll on some of our numbers. But I have better news than that. It is the beginning of spring, the end of winter today. In fact, Joyce told me that at 10:33, we passed over the mark this morning, and it became the first day of spring. So I didn't know it was 10:33, but Joyce said it's specifically 10:33. So you ought to be happy this morning, and you ought to be all smiles. This winter is gone, and springtime is here, and warm temperatures are more on the way, and so forth. And I hope even more than all of that, that you are pleased this morning, and you're smiling this morning, and you are encouraged by what we do here as we study the book of Romans. You may remember I have told you in the book of Romans that it's difficult. And I've really found that it's not so difficult to understand the material. What's difficult, for me at least, is putting it together in brief lessons. And that's especially true in Romans chapters 6 and 7. I think Paul is talking about the fact that when we enter the kingdom, yes, we have all kinds of blessings. We have eternal life. We have peace with God. We have different kind of fellowship. We have God listening to us. We have God watching over us. We have God working for our good. We have all kinds of blessings. But we enter a battle. And we enter a battle that never ends. And the enemy is Satan. And he is, in modern day terms, a terrorist. He doesn't fight fairly. He is more like a snake, and he's really ruthless, and he never stops. I don't care how old you get, he never stops. And the problem with that is that we experience what we commonly call battle fatigue. Now, I'm not talking about the kind of battle fatigue that someone would have holding a gun and hiding and shooting and all those kind of things that would happen in a battleground situation. I'm just talking about life being a battleground, and we easily get battle fatigue. For example, it might interest you to know, and you may already know, that there are members of this group right here who have constant arthritic pain. It never goes away. They battle it. They try different medicines. It never goes away. And they grow really, really tired of the fight. And it's called battle fatigue. And there are people who wrestle, as we all know, people wrestle in relationships. And sometimes they wrestle for years, and it gets a little better and it falls back, and it gets a little better and it falls back. And you grow so weary in that constant battle, and it's called battle fatigue. Now, I've seen it really often with people in their work. And they do a job for a few years, then a few more years, and a few more years. And first thing you know, it's 30 years, and they're looking back over their career, and they're wondering why they're in the shape they're in emotionally and even physically. And it's been a constant source of battle their entire career. And they're just worn out. And it's called battle fatigue. Do all of you recognize that terminology? And do all of you recognize that feeling that we sometimes get and how worn out we get? And then if you recognize that, would you recognize that the normal response to battle fatigue, after you have been there for so long, the normal response is, I just don't want to fight it any longer. And so you're like Steve, and you work at a place that's like that for 29 or 30 years, and he says, I'm not fighting it any longer. I'm done with it. And some of you have also done that. But the problem is that exact situation And that exact phenomena is happening in the kingdom. And in the kingdom, we are battling Satan over and over and over again. There's a statement that Paul makes at the end of Romans chapter 7. I don't know if I even interpret this correctly, but this is my feeling about this passage. Paul says, talking apparently about his own life, what I want to do, or our terminology might be what I know I need to do, I don't end up doing it. And what I don't want to do, what I shouldn't do, I end up doing that. What a wretched man I am, Paul says. Now, do you feel that struggle? Do you identify with Paul? What I want to do, I end up not doing it. And what I should be doing, what I shouldn't be doing, I'm doing that. And it's a struggle. And we fight this battle against Satan over and over and over again. And let me ask you, do you ever in the kingdom have battle fatigue? And you just get tired. You just get worn out with it. And you get discouraged with it. And you have a tendency to say, what's the use? What's the use? Well, I don't know if it's happened to you or not. It has happened to me. And I have seen so many others to whom it has happened. And by the way, many of those others to whom it has happened do not attend assemblies at all. They just got beaten up too long by Satan, and they didn't want to fight it any longer. So Paul writes these 2 chapters. I think, only my opinion, I'm not sure about it, but my opinion, he writes these 2 chapters to those of us who are in this battle, who are likely going to get battle fatigue, or who may have it exactly right now. And there's too much material here for one lesson. I may only do one lesson, but there's too much material. I gave Burke a set of slides. You're going to be really happy over this. If you don't smile over anything else, smile over this. I gave him a set of slides Wednesday night. It took him a while to read what I had written. In fact, we had to redo it some. I barely got home, I think, or at least the next day, I think it was that night, I sent him a text and said, forget all those slides. It's kind of junk. I got to start over. So I've come back to one verse. I have one verse this morning in Romans chapter 6 and verse 21. And I have looked at the book of Romans prior to this day, prior to this series. I've taught it a couple of times in Bible classes. I have never seen this question. I have never, ever seen this verse of Scripture. Isn't that interesting? It just popped out of nowhere almost to me. And Paul's going to ask this question of all of us. What benefit did you reap at the time from the things that you are now ashamed of? Now let me rephrase that. What benefit did you ever get from sin? What benefit did you ever receive from the sin that you used to live in all the time? What good ever came from it? Now, I ultimately want you to ask that question of yourself. What good ever came from my sin? But before I kind of dive into that for a moment, I want you to understand about sin. In the beginning, sin is attractive. That's how Satan works. He appeals to our desires. He appeals to every desire you and I can think of that we possess. And he wants us, in his appeal to our desires, to act out those desires and bring them to reality, and then it is sin. And what good ever came from it in your life? Now, I could ask that of Bible characters. I could ask it, and by the way, if I did it for as many as we could think about, we would be here till late in the afternoon asking that question. But if I ask it of just a few, like a man named Achan. If I ask a man named Achan, and Achan was a so-called soldier under Joshua, and they had finally, after all those years, crossed over the Jordan River, and they looked up, and there was this giant city called Jericho, and God gave it to them in such a miraculous way. And right after that, there's a little tiny place called Ai, and God says, go take that city of Ai. But to their surprise, they were sorely defeated at Ai. Why didn't God help us this time? God kicked those walls of Jericho down. Why didn't he do it this time? Achan. Achan's the problem. Because he had been told that first go around, don't take any of the valuable things. But he's like us. He's exactly like us. Don't look down on Achan. He's too much like Ken. Because he sees these valuable possessions. He sees this silver and gold, and he thinks, that would set me up for a long time. That would set me up for a lifetime. Life will be totally different. You see Satan working? And he takes them. And he buries them in his tent. Ask him how that worked for him. Ask him what good sin did for him. And he would look at every one of us and say, it cost me my life. It cost me the lives of every family member I had. Ask Samson, what good did sin bring in your life? Now, Samson's that strong man. You remember, everybody remembers Samson. He had the long hair. And he was going to save Israel. That was his job. But this strong, mighty man who was kind of praised and worshiped by everybody has a problem. He's attracted to ladies. He's really attracted to ladies. And he ends up, that's right, and he ends up with one named Delilah. Ask him how it really worked out. And he would say, that sin, I lost my eyes because of it. And I disgraced myself, and I disgraced my family, and I left all of Israel out there by themselves to be victimized by the Philistines. Okay, one more from the Old Testament. Ask Jonah how it worked out. How does sin work out for you, Jonah? Because Jonah was told by God, go to the city called Nineveh, and he says, kind of like I do once in a while, I don't think I want to do that. I don't think I'm going to do that. And he gets thrown overboard in the midst of a storm, on a little boat. And he would say, you know how it worked out for me? You're not going to believe this, but I got swallowed by a fish. Now, let me just pause and tell you, there are Bible theologians at this very moment who say this story is fictitious. Say it cannot be true. I heard that not very long ago from a person. And I said, let me tell you that faith is a choice. You have to choose to believe. And I said, it's my opinion, you have to choose to believe this Bible in its entirety. How could anyone pick and choose what you choose to believe? So I personally, I want everybody to know I believe the story's true. And Jonah would say, here's how sin worked out for me. I lived 3 days in the most stinking, slimy environment you can ever imagine. In addition to that, that fish spit me out along with a lot of other stuff on a shore. You see, that's the way sin works. I think you get in a stinking, slimy mess over and over and over again. And in the New Testament, you can ask a young man about whom Jesus told a story. And he wanted to get out of his father's dominion and out of his father's house. And there are a lot of young men that want to do that. He takes a big bunch of money with him. He goes in a faraway place and he spends it on every kind of sinful activity you can imagine. And for a while, now everybody's got to remember this, for a while it's such fun. And for a while it's going really well. That's the way sin works. But ask him how it really worked. And he's going to say, look, I spent all that money. I didn't have anything. I was so hungry, I wanted to eat what I was feeding to the hogs. And I had to go back to my father in disgrace and ask him if I could be one of his servants. Not his son, but his servant. And I can move beyond the Bible and I can look at people around us. I can look at people around us. And I can look at people who are married and they get attracted to someone else and they end that marriage, ugly ending, and children are harmed because of it, and ask them how it worked out a few years later, and it's not a good story. It's not a good story. Just go to any prison we have in America and ask the inmates how sin worked out. It won't be a good story. And you and I can go on and on this forever, can't we? What good has sin ever done in our lives? But it's not Bible characters I'm so much interested in, and it's not the people around us I'm so much interested in. It's kin. And I hope it's you. Because the real question is, what good did my sin do in my life? What good has ever come from it? And I'm talking about things like selfishness. What good ever came from my own selfishness? Now, I will tell you about my selfishness, I got what I wanted several times. But I got some other things that I didn't want with it. And selfishness leads to greed. And that brings all kinds of problems into our lives. Because of greed, how many of us have messed up our family relationships with brothers and sisters and such as that? And then you can move beyond all of that and you can think about a host of other things that we so commonly get involved in. Our strong opinions about this or that. How much destruction have we done? How much destruction have we done in churches? Little congregations? Because we have to be right. What good has sin ever done in our lives? And Paul says the answer is not one bit of good. It results in all kinds of trouble, all kinds of difficulty. It takes you to places you never wanted to go. And sin's so addictive. Do you know that? Sin's addictive. I could have mentioned people getting involved in substance abuse. It happens all the time. Some have more addictive personality than others. But it never works out well, does it? What good? And the answer is, it destroys everything around you. It destroys you. It leads to death. I'm going to quit, but I'm going to tell you one more. I have seen more problems develop in work environments with people who have their ego out of control than any other single issue. And I often say, and it's true, I fired more people because of that problem of ego out of control than anything else. They destroy everything around them. But God says pride goes before a fall, and there always is a fall. Arrogance always ends up in a fall. And ask one of those people when they've made the fall, what good did it do? The story's not pretty at all. It's really bad. So, Paul wants us to do one thing, and that's to keep fighting. He just wants us to keep it up. All of our days, you keep it up. But here's the beauty of that. Our victory is guaranteed as long as we fight. Now, don't you think the Ukrainians wish that they knew that right now? I mean, they're fighting with all their might. They're fighting against this giant dictator that's ruthless, and all the things I could describe badly about him, I would. But they're fighting, and they don't know if they're going to make it or not. But you and I fight, and the victory's already been won. And the victory's going to be won. The issue is I just got to keep it up. And I'm saying that this morning so that none of us, not a one of us, here in this building, not a one who is watching from a distance, would give up what we have been given in this wonderful new kingdom of Jesus Christ. He's won it for us. So we got to stay in it. We got to keep wrestling with it. Because to go back is to get back in that sin world, and it's never going to work. So we're going to take the Lord's Supper. We've been trying through all these months now to make the Lord's Supper more meaningful. It's a time to remember that, yes, we are benefited in His kingdom, and we're in a battle against Satan, but we get the victory. The victory's been won because He went to that cross for us. And He's watching over us at this very moment.